History remembers names like Billy the Kid, Wyatt Earp, and Wild Bill Hickok, but some of the deadliest men on the frontier were never meant to become legends. The most dangerous gunslingers were never the ones Hollywood made famous. They were assassins who killed for money, lawmen who ruled with fear, and gunfighters whose real stories were so brutal that history almost erased them altogether. These are 10 of the deadliest gunslingers history almost forgot. Number 1. Jim Deacon Miller. The most dangerous men in the Old West did not always look dangerous. James Brown Miller, known as Killin' Jim, Killer Miller, and Deacon Jim, built a reputation across Texas as one of the frontier's most feared hired killers. That wasn't the frightening part. He dressed like a respectable man, attended church, and spoke softly. To strangers, he looked like someone who belonged in a Sunday service, not behind a string of killings. But behind that calm appearance was something entirely different. Unlike famous gunfighters who chased glory in public duels, Miller was known for ambushes and contract killings. In a frontier filled with feuds, land disputes, and revenge, he became the man people turned to when they wanted a problem permanently removed. Ironically, the frontier justice he profited from eventually turned against him. In 1909, Miller was accused of killing former Deputy U.S. Marshal Gus Bobbitt in Ada, Oklahoma. Before he could stand trial, a mob took control of the jail and hanged him. The man who spent years using violence as a weapon was finally destroyed by the same frontier justice he helped create. Number 2. John Wesley Hardin. Few men represented the violent reputation of Texas better than John Wesley Hardin. Young, intelligent, and deadly with a revolver, Hardin became one of the most feared gunmen of the post-Civil War frontier, a time when old grudges, political conflicts, and personal revenge often ended in gunfire. But Hardin was not just dangerous. He understood the power of fear. He built a legend around himself, knowing that a reputation could sometimes be more valuable than a weapon. Accounts claim he killed more than 20 men, although the exact number remains debated as stories grew larger with every retelling. For years, Hardin moved through Texas as a fugitive, gambling, fighting, and adding new chapters to his own myth. But eventually, even his own legend caught up with him. After his capture in Florida, Hardin spent more than a decade in prison. He studied law while imprisoned. After his release and pardon in 1894, he was admitted to the Texas bar and later attempted to establish a legal practice in El Paso. It did not last. On August 19, 1895, Constable John Selman walked into a saloon and shot Hardin from behind, killing him before he could even reach for his weapon. The man who had spent years watching for enemies was ultimately killed by one he never saw coming. The legend survived. The man did not. Number 3. Cherokee Bill. Cherokee Bill became one of the most feared names in Indian Territory, and the most shocking part was how young he was when violence took over his life. Born Crawford Goldsby, he grew up in a region where Oklahoma Territory, Arkansas, and Texas collided, a place filled with weak law enforcement, deep tensions, and conflicts that often ended with bullets instead of courts. By his teenage years, Cherokee Bill was already connected to robberies and killings. Unlike older outlaws who spent years building their reputations, his name spread almost instantly through communities that feared what he had become. His story showed how quickly the frontier could turn anger, opportunity, and violence into a deadly reputation. But a reputation built on fear could also become a trap. In 1895, he was convicted of murdering Ernest Melton during a store robbery. While an appeal was pending, he killed jail guard Lawrence Keating during an attempted escape. He was hanged at Fort Smith on March 17, 1896, at the age of 20. The outlaw who had terrified an entire region was gone almost as quickly as he appeared. His life became one of the darkest reminders that the Old West did not just create legends, it created tragedies. Number 4. Clay Allison. Clay Allison was the kind of frontier figure who refused to fit into a single category. He was a Confederate veteran, cattleman, gambler, and feared gunfighter whose reputation grew from a mixture of real violence and stories that became larger with every retelling. In the unstable years after the Civil War, men like Allison existed between respectability and outlaw culture. A man could run a business one day and become the most dangerous person in town the next. What made Allison frightening was not just his skill with a gun, it was his unpredictability. Stories followed him across the frontier, sudden arguments, explosive violence, and moments when nobody knew what he might do next. Some of those stories were exaggerated, but they survived because they matched the image people already had of him. Allison became a symbol of a frontier where fear could build a reputation faster than character. But the man who survived gunfights and dangerous enemies did not die in a dramatic showdown. In 1887, while hauling supplies from Pecos to his ranch in Texas, Allison fell from his heavily loaded wagon and was fatally injured when a rear wheel ran over him. The West spent years fearing Clay Allison. In the end, it simply moved on without him. Number 5. Dallas Staudenmeier. Dallas Staudenmeier proved that the difference between a gunfighter and a lawman was often just which side of the badge they stood on. In 1881, Staudenmeier became Marshal of El Paso, Texas, one of the most unstable border cities in the American West. The town was filled with gamblers, cattle thieves, gunmen, and rival factions where arguments could quickly become deadly. Staudenmeier brought his own version of justice. He was fast, aggressive, and willing to use his revolver when he believed order was threatened. His reputation was cemented during the famous 4 dead in 5 seconds gunfight, where 4 men were killed in a matter of moments, including an innocent Mexican bystander accidentally shot by Staudenmeier. The story became one of the most famous examples of frontier gun violence, and that's where his story becomes uncomfortable. Sometimes the men enforcing the law were just as comfortable with violence as the men breaking it. In 1882, Staudenmeier met members of the Manning family in an El Paso saloon during an attempted peace meeting. An argument escalated into gunfire, and James Manning shot Staudenmeier from behind during the exchange. The marshal who had brought order through gunfire eventually became another victim of the same violent culture. Number 6. King Fisher. King Fisher lived in a world where the line between outlaw and authority figure was often almost impossible to see. In South Texas, reputation mattered more than official titles. A man's influence came from his connections, his willingness to use force, and the fear surrounding his name. After years as a rancher and reputed outlaw, Fisher was appointed deputy sheriff of Uvalde County in 1881 and served as acting sheriff in 1883. That contradiction made him a perfect symbol of the frontier. The same qualities that made a man valuable as an enforcer could also make him dangerous as an enemy. His story became permanently linked with fellow gunfighter Ben Thompson. In 1884, the 2 men were killed during an ambush inside the Vaudeville Theater in San Antonio. Their deaths transformed them from living men into permanent Texas legends. But behind the legend was a reality far more complicated, a society where violence was often the fastest path to respect and survival. Number 7. Ben Thompson. Ben Thompson was one of the rare frontier gunfighters who was respected even by people who feared him. He was a gambler, former soldier, and twice elected Austin City Marshal. Unlike many notorious gunmen, Thompson had supporters who described him as loyal, honorable, and disciplined. But sooner or later, violence always caught up with him. His skill with a revolver was legendary, and his reputation followed him wherever he went. In 1882, a long-running dispute connected to gambling and personal hostility ended when Thompson shot and killed theater owner Jack Harris in San Antonio. Thompson was indicted for murder but acquitted in 1883. The incident added another chapter to his growing legend. 2 years later, Thompson and Kingfisher entered the Vaudeville Theater in San Antonio and were ambushed. Both men were killed. The frontier remembered the gunfire. It rarely remembered the complicated men behind it. Number 8. Harvey "Kid Curry" Logan. By the time Kid Curry became famous, the classic Wild West was already disappearing. Railroads, telegraphs, and better law enforcement were making the old frontier harder for outlaws to survive. Kid Curry belonged to the last generation of true frontier outlaws. A member of the Wild Bunch, he became known as one of the most dangerous men in the gang. While some outlaws relied on charm or careful planning, Curry built his reputation through violence. Pinkerton notices warned officers that Logan was habitually armed and was considered likely to resist arrest. His life was a constant cycle of robberies, escapes, and deadly confrontations. But the world that created men like Curry was disappearing. The frontier was becoming modern America, and men who belonged to the old world were running out of places to hide. Logan was captured in Knoxville in 1902, sentenced to 20 years, and escaped in 1903. In 1904, after another train robbery near Parachute, Colorado, a wounded outlaw identified at the time as Logan apparently took his own life rather than surrender. Some later writers disputed the identification. Number 9. Bass Reeves. Bass Reeves represents a different kind of frontier gunfighter. He was not an outlaw. He was the man hunting them. Born enslaved, Reeves became one of the first black deputy U.S. Marshals west of the Mississippi after the Civil War. Working across Indian Territory, he faced some of the same dangers as the criminals he pursued. His territory was enormous, isolated, and violent. What made Reeves remarkable wasn't how many outlaws he chased. It was how long he survived doing it. He tracked fugitives across Indian Territory and was later credited with approximately 3,000 arrests. While many frontier legends were created through violence, Reeves's reputation came from control. He mastered the same dangerous world without being consumed by it. By the time he died in 1910, the frontier that created him was already disappearing. The railroads were spreading, towns were changing. The era of men like Bass Reeves was fading into history. Number 10. Wild Bill Longley. Wild Bill Longley represents one of the darkest sides of the Texas frontier. His legend grew during the violent years after the Civil War, when Texas was struggling through social conflict, political tension, and racial violence. Longley became known as a ruthless killer. While awaiting trial, Longley claimed that he had killed 32 men. Shortly before his execution, he reduced that claim to 8. The exact truth remains debated, but there is no question that Longley's reputation was built around brutality. Unlike the romantic gunfighter of Hollywood, Longley represented a harsher reality, a frontier where violence could become a tool for revenge, intimidation, and hatred. He was captured in 1877, convicted of murder, and executed by hanging the following year. His death ended the life of one of Texas' most feared killers. Perhaps that's why people still remember him today. The Wild West was never only about adventure and courage. It was also about the violence people later tried to forget.